Now, Good Neighbor Events. Here's Bart Walker.
Greenhouse Ministries needs volunteers. There are volunteer orientation sessions every Wednesday afternoon at 2, Thursday mornings at 10, and then on the last Saturday of each month at 9 in the morning. Greenhouse Ministries is at 307 South Academy Street. Red Cross Heroes Luncheon honoring John Floyd, the Thursday, March 12th at MTSU's Student Union Ballroom. Call the Red Cross for more information. Maybe you're new to town and want to learn more about the history of this community. Come on over to the one-room Ransom Schoolhouse this Saturday, anytime between 9 in the morning and noon. Members of the Rutherford County Historical Society will be there to tell you about Rutherford County's history. It's all free, including the coffee and donuts. That's this Saturday, anytime between 9 and noon. Ransom Schoolhouse is at 717 North Academy Street. And yes, daylight savings time starts this Sunday. Those are WGNS Good Neighbor events.
WGNS.
Our family at Demas's Restaurant are proud to support local emergency responders who put their lives on the line for our community each and every day. This is Peter Demas, and here is this week's Demas's Emergency Responder of the Week.
Murfreesboro police officer Dustin Nicholson talked a woman off the bridge over I-24 on the Medical Center Parkway. She'd climbed over the railing and was moments before falling. Officer Nicholson spoke to her calmly, trying to ease her panic. When words were no longer enough, he quickly secured her and pulled the woman back to safety. Thank you, Murfreesboro Police Officer Dustin Nicholson.
When you see a firefighter, police officer, paramedic, or telecommunicator going the extra mile, let WGNS know, and we at Demas's Restaurant will salute them as the Emergency Responder of the Week.
Lace up your best kicks for a night of impact benefiting First Shot. Join us for the annual Sneaker Ball, presented by Venture Express. Spend Sunday, April 26th with NFL Hall of Famer and Super Bowl MVP Marcus Allen. The event kicks off at 6 with a VIP meet and greet at 5. Reserve your table today. Call Coach Andy Herzer at 615-631-5312. We'll see you at the Sneaker Ball, benefiting First Shot on April 26th.
If you're near retirement or thinking about retiring, you probably have a lot of questions. How do you make your savings last? You're ready for retirement, but are your finances? Let's work together to help ensure your finances can keep up with your unique needs over the long haul. I'm Edward Jones Financial Advisor Lee Colvin. Stop by our office in the Public Shopping Center on South Rutherford Boulevard or give us a call at 615-907-7056 for an appointment. Edward Jones, Making Sense of Investing, member SIPC.
It's All That's News with Matt Lane on News Radio WGNS.
The latest national and international news is next from CBS on All That's News.
Portions of our programming have been pre-recorded. The Good Neighbor Network, WGNS Murfreesboro, W270AF Murfreesboro, W263AI Murfreesboro, Smyrna.
This is CBS News on the Hour, your home for original reporting.
I'm Jennifer Kuiper. The U.S. military says the number of Americans killed during the ongoing war with Iran now stands at 6. This as the State Department urges U.S. citizens to leave more than a dozen Middle East countries due to safety risks after strikes by the U.S. and Israel on Iran, which have killed Iran's supreme leader. President Trump says they were the last best chance of addressing the threat posed by Iran's ballistic missiles and nuclear program. CBS's Matt Gutman spent time earlier near Jerusalem at the site of a missile strike by Iran on a synagogue. 9 killed.
These missiles are not rockets. They are guided systems. They are the size of a bus, essentially, 45, 50 feet long. They weigh tons. The warhead itself can weigh 1,000 pounds. That's what hit that town. And it obliterated the synagogue, a community center, and houses. And we saw the blast radius. It was hundreds of yards. And I spoke with one woman who survived in this community bomb shelter. Her neighbors around her were killed. She was buried in rubble. Her boyfriend dug her out.
Videos of the Clintons' Epstein testimony have been released.
Lawmakers question the former president and Secretary of State about their ties to the convicted sex offender.
I
I had no idea about their criminal activities.
Hillary Clinton testified first.
I never flew on his plane or visited his island.
A day later, when it was Bill Clinton's turn,
I did take those plane trips with him.
But he denied having any awareness of Epstein's criminal activities. Stacey Lynn, CBS News, Washington.
Both the FBI and police in Austin, Texas say that it's too soon to identify the motive behind a deadly mass shooting early yesterday outside of a bar. 2 people died, 14 more injured. Austin Police Chief Lisa Davis.
This is a complicated and large crime scene. Our priority is finding answers and the motives behind this crime.
The suspect was shot and killed by police. The case of a man who's accused of giving his son a high-powered weapon used in a deadly 2024 Winder, Georgia high school shooting is now in the hands of the jury. CBS's Skylar Henry.
The defense maintained Colin Gray had no idea what his son Colt was capable of. Meanwhile, prosecutors charged Colin Gray ignored the warning signs of Colt's mental health decline.
Colin Gray has pleaded not guilty to more than 25 charges. Police misconduct has been especially costly for the nation's biggest city. CBS's Jim Crisula reports.
New York City paid out more than $117 million last year to settle police misconduct lawsuits in cases ranging from violent arrest of protesters in 2020 to bad police work that led to wrongful convictions in the 1980s. That's according to a newly published analysis of city data.
Stocks closed mixed on Wall Street. Oil closed up almost 6%. This is CBS News.
Join Adriana Diaz and Kelly O'Grady for the perfect start to your weekend. Ease into your Saturday with CBS Saturday Morning on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
Okay, I have to tell you, I was just looking on eBay where I go for all kinds of things I love, and there it was.
That hologram trading card. One of the rarest, the last one I needed for my set. Shiny like the
designer handbag of my dreams. One of a kind. eBay had it, and now everyone's asking, ooh, where'd you get your
windshield wipers? eBay has all the parts that fit my car. No more annoying, just beautiful.
Millions of finds, each with a story. eBay. Things people love. Love.
You know that Big Bargain detergent jug is 80% water, right? It doesn't clean as well.
80% water? I thought I was getting a better deal because it's so big.
If you want a better clean, Tide Pods are only 12% water. The rest is pure, concentrated cleaning ingredients.
Oh, let me make an announcement.
Attention shoppers, if you want a real deal, try Tide Pods.
Stop paying for watered-down detergents. Pay for clean. If it's gotta be clean, it's gotta be Tide Pods. Water content based on the leading bargain liquid detergent.
Good afternoon. We're seeing that slow traffic trying to get up through Madison right now as we check it out live on 65 North here at Briley Parkway. Just slow go up past OHB trying to get into Goodlettsville. That's running slow. 65 northbound right there at Rivergate Parkway. Still see those showers moving out I-40 in certain parts of Wilson County this afternoon. Be careful out there as it builds. I-40 passing Donaldson Pike headed out towards Wilson County. STR Towing and Recovery says call them 24/7 if you need their help. I'm Commander Chuck. You're on time traffic.
Folks, I hope you listen in every Sunday night at 8 o'clock to the Edwin Lee Raymer Show. We'll talk about some local politics, national politics, all types of topics, all types of guests. That's 8 o'clock Sunday night, Edwin Lee Raymer Show. Talk to you then.
Rutherford weather.
Lows dip down to about 56 tonight under overcast skies. Daytime highs approaching 75 tomorrow. Mainly cloudy skies expected. I'm WGNS meteorologist Derek Height. Right now, 61.
We do it your way at Sir Pizza.
Murfreesboro's favorite pizza is now hiring at all 3 locations. That's right. Join the Sir Pizza team. Just stop on in and ask for a manager.
We're the Good Neighbor Network, FM 101.9 and AM 1450 Murfreesboro, FM 100.5 Smyrna, audio and video streaming at wgnsradio.com.
From the first pitch to the final buzzer, this is where the conversation starts. All sports talk on WGNS and Big G TV, covering the Preps, MTSU, news from Tennessee and nationwide. Now, here's All Sports Talk on the Good Neighbor Network.
And welcome into All Sports Talk for this Monday as we start a new week of sports conversation. 5 o'clock every afternoon. Dick Palmer with you. And my guest today is someone I think you're probably acquainted with. He is Larry Woody. Larry is a former sports writer and columnist for the Nashville Tennessean, and now he is a
social media guru. So, Larry, welcome to the show.
Hey, Dick, how you doing? And incidentally, we missed you at lunch Thursday, and of course, whoever's not there, we talk about them. So we told a few Dick Palmer stories when you didn't show up Thursday.
I understand that our friend Monty was there. You know, I'm kind of in this chair because Monty's been out for a while, but we're looking forward to getting him back and on a daily basis pretty soon.
Yeah, it was great to see Monty. His dad was and always will be one of my all-time favorites. And, of course, I thought the world of little Monty. I remember, Dick, as you do, him tagging around after his dad's heels on press row and aggravating everybody. So it was great to see Monty back, and he's doing pretty well. So he's making progress.
So what are you doing with yourself these days?
Well, besides talking to you and going to lunch with Jim Simpson and some of the old MTSU gang, I sit around, and as you mentioned, Dick, I write some for Main Street Media. It's Dave Gould and Ellen Gould. They have about, I think it's 18 papers now in communities around Middle Tennessee, including Murfreesboro. The Murfreesboro Post is one, and I enjoy doing it. I do mostly outdoors and racing, and just whatever anybody else doesn't want to do, Dave lets me do. So I don't get rich doing it, but it's fun. It keeps my hand in the business, and I get to, meet interesting people. So I enjoy it, but it's fun to do.
You're a native Tennessean, but not from the mid-state area, I think. Weren't you from up on the plateau or more easter?
Now, at Crossville, and it's right on the line. We were trapped in, when I was going to high school, we were too far from Knoxville for the Knoxville papers to cover as much, and too far from Nashville for the Nashville papers to cover as much. We were sort of a no man's land between Knoxville and Nashville, but it was a fun place to grow up, and it's a fun place to visit now.
You've always been an avid outdoorsman, and I just wondered if that went back to your youth, your younger days up there, fishing and hunting and that sort of thing.
It was, Dick. Back then, we couldn't afford stick and ball sports, and they're too far out in the country if we could have afforded it. So fishing and hunting and prowling around the outdoors, camping, backpacking, that kind of stuff. That's what we did mostly for recreation as kids growing up. And of course, back then, Dick, up on the mountain, whatever we caught or shot, we ate. Nothing went to waste. So we kind of grew up in the outdoors, and as I say, it's a good way to put some food on the table once in a while.
You've written some interesting stories about your family, your grandpa, for instance, and I know you've got a lot of stories, but that had to be a fun place to grow up.
Oh, it was fun. I had the perfect childhood. It's fun to sit around, and you ask what to do with my time, Dick. A lot of times I just sit around and reminisce about how much fun it was. My grandfather, Grandpa Woody, was a justice of the peace. When I came along, now when he was young, he was a lawman, and he killed a man on Crossville Main Street at a shootout. And Dick, that might explain my temper. But anyway, later on when I came along, he was a pot-bellied little bald man and peaceful, just a gentle, mild-mannered as could be, and he's a justice of the peace. And he used to pick me up in his old green A-model Ford when he'd go to town at the courthouse, and he'd drop me off at the ice cream parlor, and I'd eat ice cream while he was across the street at the courthouse. And it was just so much fun growing up. It's I wish every kid, every little boy, every little girl too, for that matter, I wish they could experience a childhood like I had. And I think, Dick, from what we've saw some stories, I think yours was kind of similar to that too. I know how close you were to your dad.
Yeah, and we grew up more in not in a rural area, but where I grew up in Rutherford County was rural at the time. And now it's about in the middle of town.
I don't know if there's any rural area left in Rutherford County, is there?
I don't know. It used to be good dove hunting country down here, but I don't know about it anymore.
I know it. Every time I go to Murfreesboro, it seems like there's another shopping mall on what was used to be a field the last time I was there.
Well, after high school, and where did you decide to go to school to further your education?
I went to Martin Methodist College in Pulaski. It was a 2-year school at the time. And one of my buddies lives in Murfreesboro. He might be listening to your show, Dick J. Cole. He was a little All-American basketball player at Martin, and Martin's greatest athlete, in my opinion. Jay lives in Murfreesboro now, and I visit occasionally. I was over a couple of weeks ago. And but to answer your question, I went to Martin Methodist College. There's a young coach with a crew cut named Jimmy Earl was coaching the Martin Indians at the time, and that's where I got to meet Coach Earl. And he went from Martin to MTSU as an assistant, and then you know the rest of the story from there. But no, the 2 Martin years, Dick, those were the 2 best years of my life. I met my future wife, Mary Frances, there. I made lifelong friends like J. Cole, and so it was a great experience. And then after Martin, I transferred to Belmont. As I say, Martin was a 2-year school then. My wife and I transferred to Belmont, and I played tennis there. Or played at it. I don't know how good I played, but it was Belmont's first tennis team. I played on the first team that Belmont, now Belmont University, fielded. So, and then while I was going to Belmont, I worked part-time at the Tennessee and working my way through school. Raymond Johnson, Mr. Johnson, hired me to work part-time in the sports department. I graduated from Belmont. The Army borrowed me for a couple of years. For some reason, Dick, the Army thought an English lit major would make a good rifleman, so I ended up out in the jungle in Vietnam for a while. That wasn't much fun. And when I got home, I came back to the Tennessee and spent the next 40 years there. So
I was going to ask you how you got interested in sports writing. Was it from your part-time work when you were in school, or did you have instincts in that area before?
No, I always wanted to be a writer. When I was a little kid, I knew I wanted to be a writer if I could learn to write and spell. I still can't spell. But anyway, I knew from the get-go I wanted to be a writer at some form. I just didn't know about sports writing. But when I got to Belmont, the Tennessean was looking for part-time help in the sports department, and I was interested in sports. As I say, I played tennis in college at Martin and Belmont, and I was interested in sports, and so I went in, applied for a job, and I remember my interview consisted of I went into Raymond Johnson's office, and he said, introduced myself, and he said, "Can you type?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Go tell Bud Burns to put you on the schedule Friday night." Seriously, that was my job interview. Can you type? and then I spent 2 years working part time at the Tennessee and working my way through school, and then the Army for some reason grabbed me up and borrowed me for a couple of years.
So, after you got back and went back to the Tennessean, you worked in several different areas. I know you covered football, basketball, and how did you get involved covering racing? Because I know you were a super enthusiast of the NASCAR circuit.
Dick, I had never seen a car race in my life. Back then, they weren't on television. I'd never seen one on TV. I'd never been to a racetrack or had any desire to go to a racetrack. And one Saturday afternoon, I showed up for work in the office, and John Bibb, who was a sports editor then, called me in and said he needed me to go to the fairgrounds and cover the race that night. And I said, go where and do what? I didn't know where the fairgrounds was, and I had the first race I covered, like Jerry Clower used to say, the first football game he saw he played in, the first car race I ever saw, I was covering that night. And Bibb said, just go out and look for a PR guy named Joe Carver, and Joe would take me around, show me around, and he did. And then after the race, he stood behind me and kind of dictated the story. So I tell people, Dick, the first racing story I wrote, I really didn't write. Joe Carver dictated it to me, and I typed it up. But then I became sort of the backup man, the go-to man on the racing beat when our regular writer, Tom Powell, was out of commission. I would go out and cover the racing, and I became intrigued by it, Dick. I thought it was the most fascinating sport I'd ever covered. I'd covered all the stick and ball stuff, football, basketball, baseball, all of that kind of stuff. But auto racing, it was just intriguing. The auto racers are like the last cowboys. They're just fascinating people. I remember the great sports writer Frank DeFord. I think he was the Sports Illustrated. I think he was the best sports writer I ever read. And DeFord used to say that his two most fascinating athletes were boxers and race drivers. And I never covered many boxers, but I can tell you how interesting race drivers were. So it was a fascinating beat. I kind of got forced onto it, like getting put on KP in the Army, and then I just I liked it. And Bibb apparently thought I did a pretty good job. I remember, Dick, when I was trying to get out, I said, Bibb, I don't know anything about auto racing. I don't know which direction the cars run. And I said, I sure don't know anything about mechanics. I can barely pump my own gas. And Bibb said, look, I don't want you to go out and write about Darrell Waltrip's motor. I want you to go out and write what Darrell Waltrip thinks when he flies upside down and lands on top of Richard Petty. So that was Bibb's instructions for the racing rider. And I now tried to follow that, Dick, over the years.
And those were the heydays, I think, of NASCAR and the personalities involved. And you have covered, you have gotten to know some of the greats in NASCAR racing. So we've got a few minutes left on this first segment. Give me just a couple of drivers that you were really close to.
Well, of course, I was fond of, of Darrell Waltrip and Sterling Marlin being locals. And I guess my all-time favorites, like a lot of other fans, Richard Petty. Richard's just great, and I still see Richard every once in a while. And a buddy of mine, Don Christopher from Murfreesboro, he might be listening in. Don was a big race fan. He went to Daytona with me for about 30 years. I introduced Don as my technical director. But anyway, Don and I were in a restaurant one night in Daytona before the 500, and there's a little buzz goes up, and we look over, and Richard Petty's walked in. He's got the cowboy hat, the dark glasses, all that stuff, and he starts to walk through the restaurant to a private party in the back, and he looks over, and he sees us, and he walks over and says, hey, Woody, how's everything in Nashville? And I said, pretty good, Richard. I said, I want you to meet my buddy, Don Christopher. He grew up a Richard Petty fan. And Richard shook hands and said, howdy, Don, how you doing? And Christopher never washed his hands for the rest of the week. But Petty's such a great guy, and everything that you see in public, Dick, he's just as good a guy in private. He's everybody's favorite.
Yes, I've talked to people who've known him, and I've never heard anyone say a bad word about him.
He's the most genuine person you'll ever meet. And Dale Earnhardt, Dale is one of my favorites. And a quick Earnhardt story, if we've got a minute.
Yeah.
Joe Carver, the PR guy at the track, called me one afternoon in the summer. And there's one of the NASCAR Cup races is coming up that weekend. He said, hey, Woody, said, we're trying to get some publicity ginned up for the race this weekend. Said, I've got a driver out here. He's Ralph Earnhardt's son. He said, he's going to be racing here. He said, he might make a pretty good driver. He said, can you come out and do an interview? And I said, Joe, I can't. I'm covered up here at the paper. I'm working on the desk, everything else. I can't get out there. He said, what about if we bring Earnhardt to the sports department and you interview him there? I said, okay, bring him down here. So a little while later, Joe Carver comes in with Dale Earnhardt, and you could tell Dick Earnhardt didn't want to be drug around Nashville into sports departments and TV stations and so forth. So he sat down in the chair by my desk, and the interview, I'd ask him a question, he'd just grunt, yeah, I guess, or I reckon, maybe, and he didn't want to be there. But over the years, we became pretty good friends, and I was with him about 2 weeks before he died at Daytona. He came into Nashville for a PR appearance, and I was with Dale, like I say, a couple of weeks before he died, and he became one of my really good friends. And I've told Dale Jr., about the first time I met his dad. He came to the Tennessee sports department to be interviewed, and I said, Dale, your dad doesn't go around to many sports departments anymore to be interviewed, does he? And Jr. laughed and said, no, sir, he doesn't. But that was my introduction to Dale Earnhardt.
All right, that's a great story. We're going to have to take a break here, and we'll do that and be back. Larry Woody, former columnist and sports writer for the Nashville Tennessean, is my guest. Stay with us. All Sports Talk continues after this.
Jennings & Ayers Funeral Home has served Murfreesboro families with compassion and care since 1880. As a family-owned funeral home, we're committed to honoring every life with dignity through traditional services, cremation options, and pre-planning that gives you peace of mind. For over 140 years, we've been here when it matters most. Visit JenningsandAyers.com. Jennings & Ayers Funeral Home, honoring life and comforting families since 1880.
Lace up your best kicks for a night of impact benefiting First Shot. Join us for the annual Sneaker Ball presented by Venture Express. Spend Sunday, April 26th with NFL Hall of Famer and Super Bowl MVP Marcus Allen. The event kicks off at 6 with a VIP meet and greet at 5. Reserve your table today. Call Coach Andy Herzer at 615-631-5312. We'll see you at the Sneaker Ball, benefiting First Shot on April 26th.
At State Farm, when home and auto work as a team, you score and save money. I'm State Farm agent Andy Wama. Give me a call at 615-890-0850 and let's work together to win big by saving money on home and auto. With the service you get from State Farm, you might think our car insurance costs more. I'm State Farm agent Andy Wama. Give me a call at 615-890-0850 and let me show you with discounts up to 40%. You may find it even costs less.
Since 1989, Franklin's Printworks has been Rutherford County's trusted partner for high-quality printing with fast turnaround and unbeatable service.
We love to do stuff for the community, for churches, for schools, for nonprofits. We love to get involved with them and partner with them every time we can.
Jeff Carlton with Franklin's Printworks.
People know my name, they have my cell phone number, and they can be confident that we'll make sure it gets done right.
Visit printworkstn.com. Franklin's Printworks. Print local. Print with confidence.
You're listening to the flagship station for Blue Raiders sports.
Caught 20, 15, 10, 5, touchdown, Middle Tennessee. Play up and score.
Middle Tennessee football, basketball, and baseball. Yeah, we got them.
You're listening to the flagship station for Blue Raider Athletics. I'm Chip Walters. Hear the games here on News Radio WGNS.
Middle Tennessee win. Raiders win the championship.
Your source for the Big Blue and the Borough. News Radio WGNS.
Clark's Auction Company will get you top dollar for your property.
Auctions are easy, fast, and profitable.
I've always been a big fan of auctions. Get instant sale, no contingencies.
That means the sale of your property won't depend on an inspection, financing, or appraisals.
I've known the guys over there my entire life.
Call Parks Auction and Realty or visit parksauction.com.
Clark's Auction Company will get you top dollar for your property.
Clark's Auction Company, committed to auction excellence.
Sold it to you, 27.5.
Good afternoon. We're seeing that slow traffic trying to get up through Madison right now as we check it out live on 65 North here at Briley Parkway. Just slow go up past OHB trying to get into Goodlettsville. That's running slow. 65 northbound right there at Rivergate Parkway. Still see those showers moving out I-40 in certain parts of Wilson County this afternoon. Be careful out there as it builds. I-40 passing Donaldson Pike headed out towards Wilson County. STR Towing and Recovery says call them 24/7 if you need their help. I'm Commander Chuck. You're on time traffic.
It's all sports talk from the Good Neighbor Network, FM 1019, 100.5, AM 1450, wgnsradio.com, and Big G TV.
Welcome back into All Sports Talk for this Monday afternoon. I'm Dick Palmer. My guest is Larry Woody, an old friend of mine and a retired sports writer in Nashville, Tennessee. And we were talking NASCAR racing when we took the break, Woody, and I know at that particular time, and I'm talking back in the 80s, Nashville had two daily papers. The morning paper was the Tennessean, and the afternoon paper was the Nashville Banner. And I think you guys competed with each other for stories, for exclusives, and a lot of times would find you covering the same events. So tell me about your relationship with our friend Joe Caldwell, who covered racing for the Nashville Banner, because I know you two were tight friends, but you were also bitter rivals.
We were bitter rivals, and the competition, Dick, between the two papers, the Tennessean and the Banner, was so fierce, supposedly, we weren't supposed to fraternize. We weren't even, their office was across the hall from our office. We weren't even supposed to say hello if we bumped into each other in the office. But, of course, we did. We fraternized like heck. And Joe Caldwell was as close to a brother as I'll ever have. And we traveled together. We not only, as you said, Dick, we covered NASCAR together and traveled all over the country. But we also both covered the OVC, Ohio Valley Conference, and traveled together to OVC games. And my 10, 12 years on the OVC beat was the most fun assignment I've ever had at the Tennessee. And I've covered everything from Super Bowls to Final Fours to Kentucky Derbies and all the stick and ball sports and NASCAR. But the OVC beat was the most fun, and part of it, a big part of it, Dick, what made it so much fun was because of Caldwell, my buddy Joe Caldwell, and also because of fun coaches like Jimmy Earle at the Middle and Connie Inman at Tech, wacky Sonny Smith at East Tennessee State, Lake Kelly, Austin P, and a basketball player named Fly Williams that I think you remember Fly. But anyway, the point of the story is we weren't supposed to fraternize, but we did fraternize. And also, I covered prep for a while with Bunny Huggins, Harold Huggins, who worked for the Banner, and we were tennis partners at Belmont. Bunny and I played number 1 and number 2 singles at Belmont and number 1 doubles. And yet we ended up competing against each other, with Harold with the Banner and me with the Tennesseans. So some of the best times I had were with the Banner guys that I wasn't supposed to even speak to in the hall.
Well, and I can also say that some of the best times I've ever had covering Middle Tennessee football and basketball were back in those OVC days, because a lot of it was the personalities, the venues that you went to. You got to know people in other schools, and it was just like a big family.
It is, and it's sad now to look back, of course, on the OVC. There's not much left of the old OVC anymore, but those were such fun times. And like you said, Dick, a lot of it was the personalities too, but they also had great, the OVC basketball was great. OVC football was fun. You had the rivalries like Tech and Middle and Middle and Austin P. And so it was just so much fun. The games were fun. The people were fun. The coaches were fun. And it was just a fun time. The most fun, like I said, Dick, that I've had in my 40-plus years as a Tennessean was covering the OVC.
All right, I want to hear some coaches' stories now from the OVC days and from your travels with Joe. And remember, this is a fabulous show.
Well, I'll tell one about my buddy Jimmy Earle. At one point, he was playing was playing in a tournament. And I think it was at Austin P was hosting it, but there was a boot company that gave out boots to all the coaches, a pair of expensive shiny new boots. And Coach Earle left his boots setting out front. They were going to come by the next day and get them and polish them or whatever. Our buddy Jim Simpson and Jim Freeman got a pair of old worn-out boots from the Salvation Army, and they switched Coach Earle's brand new expensive boots with the old pair of worn-out boots and left them sitting out in front of his door. And that's one of the jokes that was played on Coach Earle. And of course, our buddy Monty Hale, Monty Jr., they were always playing jokes on Jimmy. It's no wonder he wasn't even more of a nervous wreck than he was. But
what about some of the Austin P coaches?
Well, Lake was a great coach, I thought, and a good personality. He was pretty low key, particularly compared to Coach Earle and Connie Inman. They were both wacky. But Connie Inman told it was, and Jimmy Earle, Coach Earle, they joined us, Dick, for lunch at Legends, where you were supposed to have been last week, and they're sitting around telling war stories about the old days. And Jimmy was talking about a game that's played at Western Kentucky. And it went right down to the wire, and he said there were about 5 seconds left, and we went up to the free throw line to shoot 2 free throws, and Connie Inman interrupted and said, "Wait a minute, you shot free throws at Western Kentucky?"
Nobody does that.
Almost unheard of for a visiting team to shoot a free throw. But they were fun, and they're still 2 of my best friends on the planet, Jimmy Earle and Connie Inman. But like I say, that's kind of like the Martin days. You made lifelong friends during those OVC days, and you were there. I'm preaching to the choir here, Dick. You were right in the middle of all that.
Yes, and like I say, just fun days. Now, back in the '80s, and I'm like a lot of people. I kind of dwell in the past, but I like to hear stories. We didn't have email, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have a lot of things we have now that makes the job easier, I guess. But tell me about some interesting deadlines that you've had, because I know as working at a morning paper, you had to get your stuff in time to make the early edition. Now, the afternoon paper was different because they could come in and take their time and write their story for the next day. But tell me about deadlines working for a morning paper.
For most of my career at the Tennessean, Dick, on game stories, I really didn't write game stories. I would dictate them over the phone because, a lot of the times the games would be over, say, 10:30, and our deadline was 10:45. I might have 10 or 15 minutes to try to get to the locker room, get a couple of quotes from the coaches or players, and then get back to the press row to a telephone and call in my story, and I would just dictate it off the top of my head. I'd jot down a few notes and have the play-by-play I'd kept, and then just dictate the game story over the phone. So I really didn't write many stories back then. I dictated the stories, and sometimes you can imagine some of the typos that ended up in the paper when you're dictating a story from press row with all the noise and confusion around you. But then you're right. The drawback though with the Banner being an afternoon paper, they weren't on deadline, but they had to get in at 4:00 in the morning to start putting the stories together, the paper together. And so a lot of times Caldwell and I would be getting in about 4:00 in the morning, and Joe would have time to brush his teeth and go on to the office when I could go home and go to bed. So like everything else in life, Dick, I guess those early deadlines, they can be good or bad depending on maybe on which side of the deadline you're on.
As I said, there were no cell phones then. So what's the weirdest place you've ever had to use the telephone to dictate a story, Rob?
A funeral parlor. I dictated a story from a funeral parlor once. It was a small town. It was back in my high school days, and when I'd go to cover a high school game, a prep game, the first thing I'd do would be look around to make sure I could find a phone. And some of the press boxes, Dick, back then, as you know, they didn't have phones in them, so I'd have to find a pay phone or somewhere around the office. And this little town, I think it was Hartsville. But anyway, the only place I could find that was open that time of night could be sure it was open and had a phone was a funeral parlor, funeral home. And so I asked the people beforehand if I could use their phone that after a game. They said, sure, just come on over. So I dictated my game story from a funeral parlor.
And as I could make a pun out of that, but I will pass that for the time being.
There's a lot of punchlines you could drop in that story.
So in order to get your story together, you had to get quotes from coaches. And how cooperative were coaches back then, knowing that you had a deadline and that you needed to get your job done? Their job was over momentarily.
And they were good. They were cooperative, and they understood I had to kind of hustle. And sometimes, Dick, broadcasters like you, they might do a coach's show immediately after the game, and sometimes I would steal a quote from the coaches on the coaching show. Sitting on the press row, I could get a couple of quick quotes from there if it was really really urgent. If I was getting pretty close, but one of the more interesting quotes I got was from Connie Inman when he was at Tech. Connie had benched one of his players. I think his name was Larry Shade, and he was a good player, but he'd had some kind of trouble during the practice that week. And Connie not only didn't start him, but he didn't put him in the game. Shade stayed down at the end of the bench during the game, and with about 2 minutes left, the Tech was behind 12, 13 points. The game was over. So Connie looked down the bench and said, "Shade, get in there." And so Shade got up, he walked over, took his warm-up jacket off, and threw it in Connie's face and went and sat back down on the bench. And so after the game was over, I went into the dressing room. I said, "Connie, I don't know how to ask this, so I'll just ask you, what are you going to do about Larry Shade?" And he said, "Shade, there's nobody on my team named Shade." so that was Connie's way of answering the question.
Quick decision. Who were some of the...
But the rest of the story, it had a kind of a happy ending. Years later, Connie said he was working in his office one day at an insurance company in Cookville. The phone rings, and he says, "Coach, it's Larry Shade." Said, this is like 20 years later, Dick. He said, "That's always been on my conscience, what I did that night." He said, "You were right to bench me, and I'm embarrassed by what I did. Threw my warm-up jersey in your face that night." I said, "I want to call and apologize." And Connie said he almost teared up by that. But there were some interesting times there.
I know dealing with personalities, you had to have some personality conflicts with coaches. Now, the coaches who were easy to get along with, fine. But what about those who kind of clashed with you?
The only one I ever had any trouble with, Dick, in all those years was my 10 or 12 years, excuse me, as a beat writer at Vanderbilt. And I butted heads with Eddie Fogler from day one. From the time Fogler got to town, he seemed like he was just determined. And he used to brag about he came to Vanderbilt from Wichita State, and he used to laugh about he got the female beat writer fired at Wichita State. Something that she had written that he didn't like, and Fogler got her fired. And he tried to get me fired time and again at the Tennessean. And then he bailed out at the Tennessee and went to South Carolina, and he tried to get the beat writer fired there. So Fogler, Dick, was the only coach I ever had any trouble with in all the years, high school, college, anywhere. I didn't have any trouble with coaches in any sport, basketball, baseball, football, anything except Eddie Fogler.
So you find people in that profession generally know what you're trying to do and will be able to work with you.
Yeah, Fogler's problem was he grew up at the knee of Dean Smith in North Carolina, and for 20 years he's played for him. He's an assistant for 20 years, and Dean, of course, ran the media in North Carolina. Dean Smith was a god in North Carolina, and Eddie thought he would be a god when he got to Nashville, and he found out he wasn't. He's just a little shrimp of a basketball coach, and he never could adjust to that. He thought I remember he called one day and talked to complain to Bibb, my sports editor, about something I'd written, and Bibb said, "Eddie, you coach your basketball team, and I'll run the sports department." And But again, a long answer to a short question. The only one I ever had any trouble with was Fogler.
Well, we're just about to the end of our rope here, Woody, and I never did get to get you to tell some outdoor stories because I know you've got a ton of those. But you done any fishing lately?
Not yet. It's been a little chilly for me, and also my fishing buddy who lives down the road here on Granny White Pike. During the ice storm, a tree fell on his backyard and part of his house and our fishing boat. So we may be out of commission for a while, but next time we do it, I'll tell you some Bobby Knight fishing stories.
Very good, yeah. Looking forward. We'll have you on again sometime, and appreciate
and
you.
Has a Murfreesboro ankle, has an MTSU ankle too. So
very good. Okay, Larry Woody has been our guest today, sports writer for many years with the Nashville Tennessean, and now a online, a social media writer, and check his stories out on Main Street Sports. That's going to do it for today. I think we've got high school basketball coming up next, so we'll see you again next week, same time, for All Sports Talk. This is Dick Plummer. Our producer has been Jackson Smith. Have a good evening.
Whether you need general vehicle upkeep and maintenance or a complete vehicle overhaul, Hall's Auto Care is here for you. We're locally owned and operated by Greg Hall and have been in business since 2014. You'll get excellent service and trustworthy advice with Hall's Auto Care. A+ rated with the Better Business Bureau. We're ready to help get you safely on the road. Hall's Auto Care, 907 Ridgely Road, just off Broad Street behind Chili's. Online at hallsautocare.net. Hall's Auto Care.
This is Chip Walters, and I'm honored to be your 2024 MTAR Realtor of the Year. I'm with Exit Realty Bob Lamb & Associates, and like many of you, I've seen the real estate market shift and change. People often ask, Chip, what's really going on? Well, that's a great question, and I believe in answering with solid, factual data. So let's cut through some of the noise. I invite you to reach out. Let's have a conversation about your real estate goals and the current market trends in your neighborhood. You can find all my contact information at choosechip.net.
Next on All Sports Talk, it's the Blue Raider Insider Report with Chip Walters of Exit Realty, Bob Lamb & Associates.
Well, good afternoon. It was quite an exciting weekend at Murphy Center for Blue Raider basketball, and the Lady Raiders had success on the road as well. We'll be talking about all of that coming up tonight on the final versions of the Blue Raider coaches shows will be at the Boulevard at 6 o'clock, and that'll be the Rick Insel show. And then at 7 o'clock, it will be Nick McDevitt live here locally. You can hear it on 95.1 or on Facebook, the Blue Raider app, or on GoBlueRaiders.com. Those shows will be re-aired the next couple of days here on WGNS. You'll hear more about that a bit later. On the men's side, Javin Carter's 27 points were the most recorded by a Middle Tennessee player this year. With 6 seconds left in overtime, Carter cascaded down the lane, and the New Mexico State defense collapsed on him. That's when the Alcoa native made a senior-like play on senior day, floating a lob to Torrey Alston, who threw down the game-winning alley-oop with 4.7 seconds left to play, and an 86-85 Blue Raider victory. Carter's career-best performance not only helped win the game, but helped the Blue Raiders tie it late to force overtime after trailing by as much as 14 points with 10:27 to play. The win helped to move the Blue Raiders up in the standings. The Middle is now in a three-way tie with Louisiana Tech and Jacksonville State for 5th place in Conference USA, and 2 road games coming up this week at FIU and at Missouri State. After a tough loss at Liberty, Middle Tennessee on the road at Delaware on Saturday night, and the Blue Raiders knocked off the Blue Hens 67-53. In the first quarter, Delaware had an early 5-0 lead, but Middle responded with a 12-0 run to go ahead 12-5 and never trailed again. By halftime, Middle was up by 15, with freshman Macy Pfeiffer recording 14 points for a score of 38-23. During the third quarter, Blair Bogus scored a layup to extend the lead to 12, and then it was Savannah Davis by assisting a Pfeiffer three-point basket, extending the lead to 63-44, and the Blue Raiders won it 67-63 before heading back home. The Lady Raiders now find themselves in a three-way tie for second place in Conference USA. Louisiana Tech has already wrapped up the regular season championship with a 15-1 record. FIU, Missouri State, and Middle are all 10-6. Liberty is 10-7. Sam Houston is 9-7. So 5 teams there will battle it out for those spots in the upcoming Conference USA tournament. All right, get you some other headlines here very quickly on other sports. Middle Tennessee baseball won the first 2 games of the series against Illinois State and got off to a great start against the Redbirds on Sunday. And with 2 outs in the top of the first, the Blue Raiders walked the